Hi guys. So thank you so much for joining us. My name is Lindsay Marshall. I'm the room host for today, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Joe Matisse. Joe is from the University of Chicago and the NORC Centre within there. So without further ado, he is going to give you an overview of their implementation of SAS via Workbench. So I'm super excited to hear what he has to share with us today. So over to yourself, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Let's give him a hand, guys.
All right, folks. Thanks. Thank you very much for that introduction, Lindsay. Today, I'm going to be taking you through NORC's implementation of SAS via Workbench. I'm going to tell you a little bit about NORC, about who we are. I'm going to tell you a little bit about why we were interested in SAS via Workbench. Then I'm going to tell you how we set it up. It's very high level. I'm not going to go super detailed here. It's just information you'll need in order to understand how to set it up, the people you're going to need, et cetera. I'm going to talk briefly about onboarding users on SAS via Workbench. Then I'm going to talk about how we are actually using SAS via Workbench today and in the immediately near future. And then finally, I'll talk about some of the next steps. So just to start off with, NORC at the University of Chicago is an objective, nonpartisan research group. We are looking to do research in the public good. Right? We're a not-for-profit organization. We're not asking you why you're buying a sweater. Right? We're asking people for information that will help government and state or federal government and state and local leaders, as well as educational institutions, help make better decisions and better understand the world. We're working with a lot of different organizations like the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the National Institute for Health, Department of Justice, Department of Defense, et cetera, doing work to help them do their jobs better. We have around 3,000 employees. I would say around 10% of those use SAS in some capacity in their job. Most of them not 100% of the time, right? But maybe some percentage of the time they touch SAS. Another 10% or so use R or Python, and some of that overlaps, some of it doesn't. But use R or Python for statistical purposes as opposed to application developers that are developing websites or something that are not statistical based. So about 10% of those 3,000, so 200-300 users of SAS and 200-300 users of R and Python. We have many different levels of users in the organization. Some of our people have been working for 20 or 30 years or more and are extremely high level, extremely comfortable in SAS, are capable of doing pretty complex things, are using SAS or R for very complex models that might take days to run, et cetera. Some of the users are brand new. They just got their master's degree in some social science category and are maybe can write a data step if they're lucky when they start with NORC. And so we have to support users at all these different levels. We also have very highly variable workloads in NORC. A lot of our users are doing very simple things with SAS or R. Some of our users are doing extremely complex things that are extremely CPU intensive, memory intensive, et cetera. So we need an environment that can support both kinds of users. Our SAS environment, we have, prior to Workbench anyhow, this is what the SAS environment looked like at NORC. We had, the primary environment is a SAS 9.4 M8 server that has a SAS Studio or SAS Enterprise Guide you can use to connect to it. You're doing, the majority of our users are using this. That has a ton of space, several terabytes of disk space. There's actually 3 physical servers that we can load balance between. So users typically have plenty, for typical workloads, we have lots of space on these servers. For users who want something different, we have a few other options. We have a desktop environment, SAS 9.4 desktop on Citrix, where people can log in, get a Windows desktop, and run normal SAS programs there. That's mostly used by people who either have very limited workloads or just are really comfortable with the old way of doing it. But those are more smaller. The servers aren't as big, so that's not for the big, more complex usage. We have some application servers that are purpose-built for scheduling. Neither of the first 2 servers is mostly used for scheduling. So this is we have some purpose-built application servers that just run SAS to DXC, essentially command line for our job schedulers. And then we have a SAS Viya 3.5 environment, and in that we have SAS Visual Analytics. Why do we have SAS Viya 3.5? Well, this is going to be part of the reason why we're thinking about Workbench. We don't support Kubernetes. Our server engineering team is not interested in doing all the work that's necessary to support Kubernetes, so we can't actually support SAS Viya in any sort of installation where we have to do any of the work. So we still have SAS Viya 3.5 running our visual analytics, which it's still able to do. But of course, that limits us, which I'll get to in a minute. Other than SAS, we have folks using Python for doing all sorts of statistical work. We have a lot of R users. I would say we have probably 150 to 200 R users, again, in different levels of R, both doing sort of just the same kind of stuff you're doing in SAS, but in R, modeling, sampling, weighting, all that fun stuff, data cleaning. Also, we have Posit Connect, which is for our Shiny applications. We build visualizations in our Shiny and then put those on websites. Cloud-wise, we both use AWS and Azure. We're probably more on the AWS side, but we do both AWS and Azure. Some of that's client-dependent. If there's a client who wants to do work in AWS, the federal government, for example, mostly is AWS side, so we mostly work there. We have other clients who like Azure more, and so we're able to work with them as well in that space. Common uses for SAS as well as R at NORC. Data transformation, that's probably our biggest one, right? We are a survey research organization, so we get data from surveys, and we use SAS to turn that data into something useful for the researchers. That is typically data steps, lots of low CPU usage, high disk, very simple, straightforward programming. We have a stats group that does all sorts of the usual stats things, particularly sampling and weighting, since again, we are a survey research organization. Sampling and weighting is a large part of the actual CPU usage of my SAS servers when they're running those proc survey select and things like that routines. They also do more complex modeling, regression analysis, et cetera. This is still SAS 9, so we don't get to do the really fancy SAS Viya modeling stuff, but SAS 9 still has a pretty good selection of options there. We do some report generation and some visualization. Again, we have SAS Viya 3.5 specifically for visual analytics. But I would say mostly the first two are the majority of the users that I'm supporting, the data transformation and sampling, weighting, regression, et cetera. Now, I'm in IT. Just to give you my personal background, I'm the SAS administrator. I've been a SAS programmer for, 15, 20 years now, I think. Just about 20 years. And I mostly, though, have moved into the administration and supervising. I supervise a team that does a lot of these things. But I am in the IT department, and that means that when I go to the data science meetings, I'm the person everyone complains to. So if you all are not in IT and you're in data science, it's okay. We hear your complaints. It is literally my job to listen to those complaints and try to fix them, right? And so I was hearing these same things over and over again, okay? First one, insufficient space, disk space or CPU or RAM, for high-intensity burst workloads, right? So I would have users that say, I need a huge amount of CPU. I want to run something that could be parallelized 64 times, right? And you only have 4 cores on the machine you're giving me, maybe 8 cores, right? For the most part, SAS doesn't really need more than 4 or 8, but there are the occasional times where you are doing something that needs more than that. Or I'm doing something where I need a ton of RAM. I need hundreds of gigabytes of RAM. But most of the time, my server doesn't do that. My server typically runs at 25% CPU utilization, 35 to 40% RAM utilization, very steadily, even though it's got 100 plus users on it. Right? It's built for that size. But one person for just like an hour needs a lot more than that. This is even more so on the R side. On SAS as well, though. Either way, sometimes I'll have someone who needs a huge amount. But I can't justify going to the server team and saying, I need twice the RAM that I had before. I need 4 times the CPUs that I had before. They'll tell me my utilization is 25% of what I got now. Why would you want to quadruple it, right? that even though we are using virtual machines for a lot of these things, virtual machines, like they still need to allocate the space in the virtual machines for me. And they're not interested in doing that. So that's the number one complaint. Number two is when that person does run that huge job that takes a ton of RAM, well, we've got a bunch of other users on that shared environment, right? We have SAS Studio on that SAS server, even though we have 3 servers, right? One of those servers, all of a sudden, everybody can't do anything for a little while, or maybe they even crash the server because one person is doing something that's taking up all of the resources. You know, especially if I'm only giving them 4 CPUs at a time, well, guess what? They're probably running a whole bunch of jobs, each taking up 4 CPUs, right? So all of a sudden, ta-da, now all 32 CPUs on my SAS server are used by one person. Nobody else can do anything. Python users don't have anywhere to work at our company. Python, so R has POSIT, right? POSIT has its own, it's like the RStudio. There's servers that they support. Python doesn't really have that. Unless you get really, really complicated, right? Python is basically, you're sort of expected to figure it out yourself. And so a lot of our Python users complain that they don't have anywhere to do Python development. The only places they have are their laptop, or they can request a virtual machine, just a blank Windows Server image. But that blank Windows Server image, particularly that 5th line there, it takes a long time to get, right? They have to ask the server engineering team to make it. They have to allocate the space for it in the virtual machines. They have to do all this stuff. That same server engineering person is probably supporting 45 other requests because they're very busy people. Probably takes a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get them that, except they need it now. They don't need it in 2 or 3 weeks. Even when they do get it, it's probably too slow. A lot of, no matter what you get, the CPUs on our virtual machines are not the fastest. We don't have the absolute fastest CPUs nowadays. And so what they do get, when they do get something, is still too slow for what they want to do, especially for these high CPU-focused things that some of our like modeling and statistical programmers are doing. And finally, mostly this complaint's about SAS, but a little bit R2. We don't have the newest features fast enough, right? I think we're going to have M9, 9.4 M9 out pretty soon. I mean, that's 9.4. It's not VIA, so it doesn't have the new VIA stuff anyway. But even then, it's going to take me 4 months to 6 months probably to get it installed, because I've got to take the machine, each server I've got to take down, I've got to test it, I've got to do a whole bunch of work, and this is while I'm doing all my other stuff. So they're not even going to get the newest version of 9.4 for a little while after it's released. With VIA, of course, we don't have regular VIA at NORC, so they're not getting those features at all. So I've definitely had many, many requests for, can I do this, can I do that, can I do this, can I do that? Well, I can't support that with our current environment. So SAS VIA Workbench was the answer to a bunch of these questions. So first off, SAS VIA Workbench is a single platform for our SAS, R, and Python users. So all the people in that data science work group that I meet with, they all can go here. It isn't necessarily the only platform for them. There's definitely our users are going to want to use other things. So Python users that will want other things depending on their usage. But it is a platform that can answer a lot of these problems for all of those data science users. Users can, on demand, create their own machine of the appropriate size, right? You can go in and say, I want this many CPUs, I want this much RAM, from the options that we give them to pick, and they get it. They get what they need. They also have dedicated resources. There's no shared resources here, right? When they say, I want 16 CPUs and 64 gigabytes of RAM, they get 16 CPUs and 64 gigabytes of RAM, and no one is fighting them for it. And if they do something horrible in R and crash it, because that's what our users do, they only crash their own machine. They don't crash anybody else. So that dedicated resources is a huge benefit for those users. We can expand and contract it as they need it. So to save some money, they can start out at that 2 CPU size. They can do some work there. They can develop their whatever. And then as soon as they actually need more space, they can swap that to a 16-core, 64 gigabyte RAM machine. It's really good for those burst users who have most of the time don't need to do very much, but then just for like Tuesday, they need extra. Ta-da, they can get their extra without having to ask me for it, without me doing any work at all. They just get it right there for themselves. VIA Workbench is simple to set up and maintain. I have to do almost no work Almost all of the work is done by SAS. SAS updates the image, and there's a new version of it, whatever. They do all that work, they publish that, and then we just get it. It just magically appears one day like, ooh, this has some new features, this is cool. I don't have to update it, I don't have to patch it, I don't have to do any of that stuff. So the actual administrative part of my job goes way down with SAS Viya Workbench, which I am a huge fan of. I'm a person who is not an administrator, primarily.
So giving users control over the resources dedicated to them, I would imagine that would lead to everybody selecting the max.
It is always a risk, and that is one of the things I can do as an administrator. I can see what they're using at least, but yeah, maybe, and obviously that's something you have to consider. But hopefully people will behave themselves. Maybe, I certainly encourage people to start at 2 CPUs and then see what happens. You'd be surprised at what two CPUs can do. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to go through 3 use cases real quick. And these are the 3 use cases that I wanted to consider when we started considering SAS Viya Workbench. The first one is our high-intensity SAS users. These are the SAS users that are complaining to me that I don't have enough CPUs, enough RAM for them. We don't have very many of these. We have like 4 or 5. But those 4 or 5 people are very loud and very annoying. So I want to try to figure out how to solve their problems, make it so they don't keep emailing me every 30 minutes about something going wrong. And I think that hopefully SAS Viya Workbench can do this for them. So they have it's a small number of users with extremely intensive processes. They also can cause negative impacts. They can, especially when they do things like do a Cartesian join between 2 tables that ends up causing, like 3 terabyte file to pop up in a work directory, which 3 terabytes is the disk size. So that means it crashes everything. And they're also the users that are more likely to demand new statistical features. These are the people that want that cool modeling stuff that's in Viya. I can give that to them here because I don't have to support Kubernetes. I don't have to support any of that. I just have to do a few things that I'll show you in a little bit in AWS, and then they get access to a lot of these things. The second group are our, and I always struggle with this, our users that also have either large files or otherwise have large jobs. Our current environment that we use for R is Posit Workbench, same name, totally different thing though, but that's a shared environment. It's on-prem, shared environment, some number of CPUs that everybody gets to share, some amount of RAM that everybody gets to share, some amount of disk that everybody gets to share. We have about 30 concurrent users that primarily use that platform. Every once in a while, one of them does something that just crashes everything. It's extremely easy in R to use all the RAM that's available to you. And so about every 2 weeks, we'd have an outage because someone would do something silly, load some big file, and it would cause the whole server to crash. My hope here is both to give people a better environment that has more resources available to them, because we had people that were running jobs that would run for 4 or 5 days in our current environment. My hope is to make that smaller. And second, it gives them that individual space where they can do things to their heart's content. And again, if they do something silly, it crashes their system, and then they can fix their system. But it doesn't crash everyone else. It doesn't stop all the other workflows at the company to come to a grinding halt. Finally, we have what I'm calling cloud-forward projects. All right, so again, we're a project organization. We bid for projects from the government and from educational institutions and things like that. And more and more, those projects, instead of 10 years ago, those projects were saying, you cannot use the cloud, none of our data can be in the cloud, et cetera. Well, now a lot of these projects are saying, our data has to be in the cloud. You can only use the cloud. But using SAS in the cloud before Workbench had been a little bit complicated, particularly because we don't have regular Viya here. So setting up Viya in the cloud doesn't really work too well because people aren't used to it. It is very hard, very high learning curve to switch from SAS 9 to Viya if you've never used it before. Not impossible, but it's hard for one project to just do it for that one project. And even then, there's still the Kubernetes and all the other stuff. So I wanted a way to use SAS in the cloud that didn't involve me setting up a SAS 9 server on an EC2 instance, which to me doesn't feel very comfortable either. And it would take days to do, right? It would take several days, probably a week for me to do that. I also want to think about processing data where the data is, right? So it makes sense. When your data is on premises, maybe it makes sense to process it there, but if your data is already in the cloud, it doesn't make sense to bring it on premises, run it through the SaaS servers, and then kick it back to the cloud. I'd rather just do it all in the cloud. So for those projects, I'm able to support them, but also with the minimal overhead, with the least amount of cost and the least amount of me having to do stuff administratively. Okay, so now I'm gonna jump into setting up SaaSify Workbench, and then when we're done with the setup and the onboarding, then I'll get back to those 3 use cases and tell you how that's gone so far. All right, so setting up SaaSify Workbench. These are the folks that are gonna be necessary, sort of Ocean's 11, right? Gather the team. This is the team we need to set up SaaSify Workbench. It's not a lot of people. It might even not be this many people because you might have overlapping jobs. You basically need 3 people, other than SaaS, of course. You need SaaS to give you the, license and get the license from the contracts and all that. But on-prem, you need these 3 people. You need an AWS administrator. You need someone to do, so we use Active Directory / EntreeID to do our identity verification, like when you log in. Your organization might be different, but for us, it's Azure EntreeID. And then you need a SaaS administrator. That's me. So the AWS administrator is doing most of the work. And most of the work is still probably less than a day, might be only a couple of hours. They're going to figure out some stuff for the environment ahead of time. They're going to define IP ranges for a bunch of things. They're going to define where you're going to run this. Are you going to run this in East 1, East 2, et cetera, which AWS environment. And they're going to define some storage, because you need some storage to be associated with this. This is fairly easy if you're used to doing this. Our AWS administrator was fairly new, so it did take them a little while longer. We needed a little bit of help from SaaS. Fortunately, they were happy to give it to us. So once we got to that point, it was probably 2 hours at most. When you've done those things and you customize the CloudFormation template, which is basically a big form that just says all this stuff, like basically a big configuration file, and then you implement the CloudFormation template. Basically, you point AWS to it and say, here you go, do this. And once that's done, which I think that was 10 minutes or something like that, then you have an environment. The last thing they need to do was set up other storage if you need other storage, right? So we're using S3 to get data into Workbench. So they need to set up some more S3 spaces for us. Once we were done with that, they were done with their part. And for the most part, at that point, they are done. They don't have to do anything anymore, unless SaaS comes back and says you need to do something, like because we changed something big enough that you need to re-change some of this. I've minimally interacted with our AWS administrators after this. So, I mean, I think they billed a total of like 14 hours or something for all of this. So it was really quite easy. And again, I think if we did it again, they'd probably bill like 5 hours. Did not take very long. The next person was our EntreeID administrator. We use Azure EntreeID. It's like Microsoft 365 version of Active Directory. They set up Workbench as an application and set up the ability, gave users the ability to access it. Initially, we did this through EntreeID, like online. So every time they added a person, someone had to go back into EntreeID and add a person to that application. Eventually, we figured out a better way, which I'll talk about later on. But that's pretty much all they're doing. Again, this is like an hour, maybe. Finally, there's me. Hi. I'm not doing almost anything right now because this is pretty much all done for me. I have helped make some choices about sizing. There's a few options you have at the beginning about how big of a bucket you want to let people use. To go to your question earlier, you don't have to let them have access to the full size. At the moment, I don't think that's user customizable, although it sounds like maybe that's one of those things that will eventually be user customizable. But basically, I just helped make some choices at the beginning. And then after the setup, I was defined as an administrator. And I can see people's sessions. I can see who's using it. I can see, I can give people access and things like that. But I'm not doing almost anything at all. Not nearly as much, even as I'm doing in our SaaS 9 installation administratively, which is also not very much. This will change, I think, as Workbench grows and we start getting some additional options. I'm going to start getting some additional work I can do. But I'm seeing this all as a positive in that it's going to give us more options to satisfy our customers, which for me are internal customers, the data scientists. But right now, I don't really have to do very much. Mostly I give people access, and that's it. All right, now onboarding users. This is the other thing that I do, right? I help with this. The first thing is that EntreID person has to give them access. Or, as I said, we did find a better way, which is we're using Active Directory groups. All we have to do is add that person to a group, and ta-da, they get access to the application. Usually takes about an hour for everything to sync. But it's really easy. Our service desk, they put in a ServiceNow ticket, and they get it 30 minutes later when somebody answers the ticket, and then they get it an hour after that. It doesn't require any of the expensive server engineering time or anything like that. If needed, we create storage space for them. By default, right now, we don't. They just get their Workbench space. But if they need additional space, either for a project, you might have a shared S3 space that a bunch of people can access, or you might have an individual one person's S3, create an S3 bucket just for one person for them to be able to upload data to. If they need more than the space that's on Workbench, then we would create that for them. And then I send the users the URL and say, try this. And fourth, most of the time I give a quick walkthrough. Although I sent the URL to someone on Monday, one of our R users. I sent them the URL, and I said, can you test if this worked? And it didn't work because I sent it to him too quickly. And I said, try again in half an hour and see what happens. And then I checked back with him like 3 hours later, and he says, oh yeah, I've already run a bunch of programs in it. It's really, really easy. This is the only slide for the onboarding users, by the way. It is very, very easy for people to get on board. And once they're in, it's either Visual Studio Code or Jupyter. And almost everyone at the company has used VS Code or Jupyter before, and they're used to that, using that, and don't really require us to teach them. If they do, then I walk them through and I show them, okay, here's how you upload a file, here's how you do this, that, or the other thing. But at most, that's an hour or two for the users. So the onboarding now is basically from I want access to I'm using it is 2 hours maybe for most people, maybe 3 at the most, as opposed to those Python users that we're using, it was taking weeks to set them up. It's very fast, very quick. All right, so I'm going to go back now and revisit those 3 scenarios and see how these are solving those problems. Some positives, some negatives, and some we don't know yet. So just to start with, we're still, I would say, in the fairly early stages of adopting Workbench. We started adopting it late last year, or sometime last year, I forget exactly when. But then, as with all agencies that contract with the federal government, we sort of had to stop doing stuff for a while. So we picked it up a few months ago, picked it back up a few months ago. And in particular, because one of our biggest use cases is the R folks, that started actually really in April, mid-April. So we're still in the pretty new phases, but we're seeing a lot of the active development in Workbench that I'm going to point to in just a little bit is going to really help solve a lot of these things even more well than it is right now. So start off with the SaaS users. I would say our high-intensity SaaS users is probably where we've seen the least benefit so far. Only because we haven't really found very many projects that can put the data in the cloud to be able to test this with. But the ones that have do find that it's faster for them, which I'm happy about. But this is definitely the space where I think we still need to do the most exploration to find what actually works best for our SaaS users. A lot of our users are used to SAS 9, and so they've been used to tricking SAS 9 into doing things for them with things like SAS MP Connect, where you do these massively multi-parallel jobs where you run data steps 16 times, all simultaneously by using rsubmits and things like that. You can't do that in Workbench. So it's good that you don't need to do it in Workbench, hopefully, but because their workflow is adapted for sort of the old style of things, we haven't really found the right way to do that yet. But we have seen significant speed increases and things that that we have been able to convert. The R folks we've already seen several people adopt this. The biggest challenge right now is packages. Packages is always the problem in any R installation anywhere, is all these packages that open source, that people create. There's a lot of compatibility issues between one package versus the other package. They battle each other for different versions of things. And that one we're working with right now with the Workbench folks. But nonetheless, even despite that, we've still already seen people really excited by this. The very initial stages of testing things out. They're really excited. They have a space that's just them. They are looking forward to some of the new things that are coming in the next version or two. I think both the first group, the SaaS group, and this group are going to be really benefited by the changes that they're doing with NFS storage and other kinds of storage that you can attach to the Workbench. I think that's been the biggest barrier of adoption, is that we're used to everything being on our NFS. And so the concept of like dragging something up to the cloud has been a little bit difficult. Made people, this takes too long, I don't want to click stuff, et cetera. So being able to directly access the NFS, I think, is going to help really speed the adoption of both the SaaS and the ARM. But package-wise, I think that's the other thing that we're going to have to work out. And I think I'm really happy that SaaS has been working with us on that. I think we're going to solve that really soon. If you do adopt Workbench, I definitely recommend, if you have our users, just make sure all the packages work. And if they don't, talk to SaaS. SaaS will work with you and help you fix that. And the users are really particularly excited by the fact they can use Jupyter or VS Code, because we have some users that love Jupyter and some users that hate Jupyter and love VS Code. But between the two, almost everyone is happy. RStudio is the third sort of environment that people like, and I think that we will hopefully eventually get that access in Workbench. But even if we just have VS Code and Jupyter, I think people are very happy with that kind of environment. Finally, our Cloud Forward projects. So we have 2 Cloud Forward projects we've already identified and have started to do work with. One of them is a large project that has the need for file exchange with another cloud. I think Databricks or one of those, like other cloud providers, that needs to use the Parquet format. Parquet is a format that SAS 9 doesn't really know what to do with, but VIA does. And Workbench, it's one line of code. It's a libname to write a Parquet file out in SAS VIA. And again, we are giving it to someone in the cloud. So it makes sense for the data to be in the cloud anyway. So we are planning on solving that with SAS VIA Workbench. We also have a client that where we have a super high availability need, where we need to be able to give data quickly. We have like a 30-minute turnaround and basically live, right? So if anything bad happens to the server in those 30 minutes, it was about 2 days, we have a 30-minute turnaround multiple times per day, then our client will be very upset with us and will be very sad. So being able to use Workbench in the cloud, where there's a lot more resiliency, a lot more redundancy, means that we're more able to turn that around. And also means that we can, again, have that high burst availability, where we can do all our development during the weeks before on small versions of the servers, but then when it's actually time to go, when we've got 100,000 respondents that we've got to quickly process the data, weight it, do all that other stuff, develop, produce the reports, and then give it to the client, we can do that on the big version of the Workbench. So both of those are in progress. We're going to be, one of them is end of this year, and the other one is actually end of next year, so we have a long time to work on it. But both Workbench has been determined to be a really good fit for. So finally, the next steps, so both things that we're going to do and then things that we're hoping for with Workbench. We're continuing to develop our 3 main use cases. I'm working with our community actively earlier today while I was at one of the other talks, getting them, figuring out exactly what they need, trying to communicate with SAS what they need, et cetera. With our SAS users, I'm still working on teaching our sort of old school SAS users how to maybe think about different ways of doing things that will work better in the cloud. We are frequently communicating with the SAS Workbench team. They've been extremely responsive. Anytime we have an issue, anytime something doesn't, or I just don't know how to do something, 3 or 4 people who are pretty happy to answer my question right away, which has been fantastic. we're definitely looking forward to some of the new things coming. The biggest things I think we're looking forward to are NFS storage and the ability to run jobs through like a scheduler or something else, or API type concept, which is one of the concepts they talked about this morning, if you went to that talk this morning. That is on the roadmap, as well as FedRAMP compliance. Some of our projects are FedRAMP moderate, some of them are FedRAMP high, et cetera. So they're working out the possibility of offering Workbench in those environments. So we're very much looking to that. And then finally, we're looking forward to refining our process for onboarding to make our turnaround time even faster. So right now, it's a manual ticket, and then someone has to give them a group. It's still pretty fast, but it's not as fast as it could be. So I'm trying to work on something to allow users to self-onboard, where they just click a button in ServiceNow, and they automatically, all the stuff happens, and then they get access without any human being having to be in the loop. That's just a little fun thing for me. Anytime I can do even less work, I'm happier. All right, I think we have about 10 more minutes. Does anyone have any questions? Either here or online? Over here?
So with I'm via Workbench, it's really a kind of a new concept to me. So forgive me if this is a
Sure, go for it.
easy question, but with the NFS option that's coming that you're saying, does that mean you can get rid of AWS?
It's still running in AWS.
Oh,
right?
so
Workbench is always going to be running in the cloud, as far as I understand.
Okay.
That would be a better question for the SaaS folks.
Right, yeah.
But it's going to allow us to link our local on-prem NFS storage to Workbench, so you can see your files in your on-prem data center and access them and maybe copy them up or whatever,
Right.
programmatically, as opposed to having to do it in the AWS control center.
Right. So again, probably a better question for SaaS, but then it doesn't have to run on AWS though, does it? I mean,
Well, it also runs on Azure.
Right.
We run on AWS,
Yes,
but there's also an
yeah.
Azure variety. Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have some of our product managers are in just now, so feel free to catch up with those guys at the end of the session, and they can give you a bit more information. I wanted to, there's been a question submitted online as well. We've got a lot of attendees online for this session, so it's really around what are the cost implications for VIA Workbench? Do users have limits to how much power they can request and how long they can have this?
Yeah, so cost implications obviously are always a concern when you're going into the cloud. You have options for giving people like which choices they have, right? So that they can choose different sizing depending on what they need. And we can choose which options they're allowed to get. So for example, there's an option to have GPU available, which obviously GPU is very expensive. So we can either give them that or not give them that as an option. I don't currently believe that there's the ability to directly like limit people and say you only get 4 hours and you're done. That would be more of a question for the folks from SaaS. But you obviously, because you see the bill, right? You can see how much it's costing. For us, it's actually not costing very much. We're not doing a massive amount of work in it, but it's really not been very expensive for us so far. So we've been okay there. Some of the nice things about it is it shuts down when you're not using it. You don't have to remember to shut it down. It's not like one of these EC2 instances where you just got a VM running constantly, and if you don't hit shut down, it just keeps running and keeps using resources. Workbench shuts down when you're done, when you go home for the day, unless you run a job that's going to keep going for hours, but then you probably want it to keep going. So yeah, one of the things that I am hoping for eventually is a little more metrics for usage, to be able to see who's using it, and if someone is using it a lot, then maybe go talk to them. Yeah, hopefully that answers their question.
Perfect, thank you. And then the last one, which may be more for the SaaS team, but do we know if there's a way to access Workbench outside of a free trial? Is that something that you guys did at all, or did you guys not work on that?
outside of a free trial?
I think they're really asking, can they have a free trial of Workbench?
They
Can
would
we
they
do
would
that?
want to talk to their SAS. Yeah,
I
their
think
SAS
we
rep
want to
can
leave
get
that for the SAS folks.
Yeah, but it was very easy to do. Like that was not a difficult ask at all. We talked to our licensing rep, and they talked to us through everything. So
And for the rest of these questions online, I'll make sure that the team get back to the attendees because there's quite a lot, and I know we're out of time for today. I really want to say thank you so much for coming along.
there's one
We
question.
got another one?
Yeah.
I have a quick
Fantastic.
schedule jobs. Can you run on Workbench? And what happens with this feature you described where it shuts down automatically?
Yeah, I think currently you don't really have the ability to schedule jobs, but that was one of the things on the roadmap is the ability to have an API, which is something we're really looking forward to, right? Because it'd be great to be able to kick off something on Workbench on a regular time, et cetera. Currently, we don't do that. Currently, it's just interactive, but that's part of the roadmap. So, then again, talk to the Workbench folks either here or at their Innovation Hub place, and they can tell you more about that.
Okay, is that us? Any more? No? Perfect. All right, thank you so much. Let's give a big hand for Joe. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.